So afternoon, everybody. My name is Jenny Benzer and I work at Oldham Sixth Form College. I'm an English teacher and course leader for the English Language and Literature A-level course. At our college, we offer A-levels and also GCSE retakes, BTEC programmes and a T-level as well. Johnny Barker is helping me today and he's the computer science course leader and also the course leader for the digital T-level, which has been rolled out this year. So in terms of online learning and our sixth form college, our experience has been over lockdown. We offered mainly asynchronous online teaching, which you probably all know means it wasn't live. So we followed generally our normal timetables, but we did lots of pre-recorded videos using Loom and also used Google Classroom a lot to set up assignments and to communicate with students. But there wasn't really any live online teaching going on for us over lockdown. That's really changed since we came back in September. And what we're doing now is that we've got 2 year groups. So obviously probably very different if you're at a school. So year 12 and year 13. And we do alternate weeks. So year 12 is here face-to-face, following normal face-to-face teaching lessons 1 week, while year 13 are at home online. So there's only ever 1 year group in the building. And we're following our normal timetables, either online, live with those students, or doing face-to-face teaching here in the building. We use Google Meet to do our live teaching, and we use Google Classroom and G Suite in order to set up work, communicate with our students, and give them all the resources that they need. So I suppose, shall we start by sharing similar experiences, both over lockdown and what you're doing now in terms of online teaching? It would be, I think it'd be nice to know where we're all at with that really, and how your situations compare to what I've just described. So if you could use the chat function to just give a bit of an overview. Also happy if anybody would just like to use their mic and speak, perhaps we could do a combination if that works, because I don't think there's that many of us here this afternoon for that to be unmanageable. So whatever you like, either use the chat or use your microphone to give us a sense of your experiences of online teaching over lockdown and currently.
So I'll just go ahead there, Jenny, and just I'm just looking at the chat. So I'm going to manage the chat for Jenny today. We're looking at Nelson and Colne College, doing exactly the same as us in terms of year 12 and 13. 1 week in college and 1 week remote lessons using Teams. It'd be interesting to know how effective you think it's going so far, because obviously we're all really new to this. M. Dickens, we began the Purple Mash platform as soon as we went to lockdown, previously not using anything other than paper homework termlet rubrics. So quite interesting there, a bit of a different mix on that one. So we did a mixture of, this is Jane Marshall, we did a mixture of some live online teaching over lockdown using Teams and combined with some pre-recorded lessons. Some departments in Old Sixth Form had the same approach actually. Again, it'd be interesting to know how that went. Tracy. So we initially set work and sent paper copies by our parent app. On return in June, we moved to Google Classroom, and this has been used to set work across classes. We are using Google Classroom for isolating students moving forward. Rainhill High School, we use Teams for live and recorded lessons. So that's Microsoft platform, and problems are more to do with engagement of these lessons. So, well, I'm running a session on engagement actually. There's a little plug for you, Rainhill High School. next week. And then we've got Victoria. I'm in a primary school setting, and we're using Purple Mash. We want to be prepared for live teaching using Microsoft Teams. So it looks like transitioning across there. And Hyde High School, we have done exactly the same as us, Oldham Sixth Form, as you during lockdown, using G Suite and Loom. We use Loom to record our videos. All years are in school now, except one Year 8 bubble and of 30, and half of Year 9 who are isolating. So some blended learning. So there we are, Jenny.
Thank you very much. Good. So it seems like we've got a real variety there. So first comment that I'd like to make is this really from the Education Endowment Foundation. So we use this a lot, really. We use their research a lot. So the idea, if you haven't heard about them, is that all their advice is research-led and kind of proven through various research-led activities that they've done. And their message very much is that teaching quality is a lot more important than how lessons are delivered. So at the end of the day, really, content knowledge, our academic knowledge of our subjects, our experiences of how to teach, our experiences of young people and how they engage, and all the kind of stuff that we do anyway, day to day, face to face in the lessons that we've been doing over the years, that is more important than how you deliver something. So all the things that you might usually have been thinking about, and today we'll be focusing on them. So things like the importance of retrieval practice, the importance of explicit instruction and modelling, the role of metacognition and peer-to-peer support. All those things the Education Endowment Foundation say do make a difference in terms of students' grades and how they progress. They've been proven to make a difference. And so they're probably things that you were focusing on anyway in your face-to-face teaching over the years. So I suppose in an online context, it's still those things that we need to focus on and think about and apply. But obviously how to do that online does raise challenges. And for my own experience, kind of moving from the more asynchronous teaching, so the pre-recorded videos, to the live teaching, the live online teaching that we're doing now, my experience has been actually technology gives us lots of advantages in some ways that we don't have in face-to-face teaching in a classroom, but also some constraints, also some difficulties that are there to be overcome. So kind of that mix really of advantages and disadvantages. But what we'll be thinking about today is how to apply some of these ideas and theories in an online context, which can be a bit of a challenge. So first of all, retrieval practice. So the idea that recapping and retrieving knowledge from prior learnt lessons, so concepts, ideas, formula, whatever is the nuts and bolts of your subject, that element of recapping, which we've learned over the years, is just so important. And definitely the Education Endowment Foundation say that this is the one thing this is one of those things that really, really makes a difference. So retrieval practice, and they call it, don't they, low stakes assessment. So by which they mean the student is confident enough and relaxed enough to have a go. There's not going to be any consequences to getting it wrong. They're not being graded, but there is a activity where they are asked to recap what they've learned last week, 2 weeks ago, last month. And the importance of that has always been there in our lessons, and it's how to do that online that we're going to think about. So it's this idea, I suppose, just reminding us all that it's very, very tempting to think, right, I've taught that, I can move on now and get to my next topic, and I've done my job because I've taught it. So what the importance of retrieval practice reminds us is that it's not really like that. Our job is also to constantly monitor how much of it has gone in. And in order for it to go into the long-term memory, students have to have this activity as a part of most lessons, recalling what they've already learned. And it's only by that action of recalling that this information, this ideas, this concept can go into their long-term memory so that they can then use it in an exam. And it says here, just a reminder that that effort in recalling recently learnt material, that's what embeds it into the long-term memory. And the more that this happens, the easier it is for pupils to start to connect new material to previously learnt material. So moving away from the temptation to teach a topic and think your job is done, but actually really making time every lesson for recapping. And that's a bit of a challenge, given that we're probably all concerned about getting through our content, and especially because there's been missed lessons in our current situation. So it is a worry and it is a challenge, because you feel like you've got all this content to cover. So it's about making time, forcing yourself, I suppose, to make time for these retrieval practice activities, recapping, retrieval, remembering what students have learnt in previous lessons. So I thought we'd start by sharing our ideas and practices. How much retrieval are you doing, and how are you doing this in an online context? So what tools are you using when online, or just what's your practice? What do you do in order to do some recapping in your lessons? So again, feel free to use that chat function to tell us how you do this.
So we've got Leanne, as just said, fluent in 5. It'd be interesting to know a little bit more about that. Have you heard of that, Jenny, before?
No, sounds interesting.
So Tracy's said the normal recall used in our classroom sessions involves a short anchor task related to previous learning. So there you go. So it's a sort of adaptation on what previous learning has gone on, and it's recapping it. And this includes is included on online sessions as well. So it's good to reference practice in classroom and also virtual, but doing the same thing is remaining consistent. Leanne, just going back to fluent in 5 minutes of recapping on the last lesson, last week and last month. So not just going back last week, but the previous month as well. M. Dickens 01, weekly English and maths memory quadrants. So half-termly topic quadrants begin and end daily memory activators to start lessons. High 5, so fluent in 5, that's their way of saying it. And cooperative learning activities, talk to your parents, and showdown type activities. Showdown type activities. Interesting, lots of stuff going on there.
Brilliant, thank you very much for all that. So I'll talk you through what we can do. I mean, just some of the options, really. There are many options on G Suite available, but here are some of the things that's been working well for us. So first of all, on Google Classroom, there is the opportunity to set a question and everybody responds. So here is a question that I've set at the beginning of a lesson, and something that we've discussed before. So again, that kind of recapping activity, setting a question on Google Classroom and getting everybody to respond. So, you know, I talked earlier about the advantages of an online lesson. I suppose one advantage is that in a face-to-face lesson, if you were doing a recap, it might just be 2 or 3 students that verbally contribute. But the advantage here is that within 5 minutes of that opening of your lesson, every student has typed something and every student has contributed, and you can scroll through highlighting aspects that you like, aspects that need correcting, aspects that need more explanation. So the question function on Google Classroom has been good for recapping for us. Kahoot can work well. I know our law department have used this a lot. So there's lots of online quiz functions out there, aren't they? Kahoot being one of them. So yes, starting a lesson with a quiz. You can also use Google Forms for that too. So any kind of low stakes quiz where all the students are participating, that could be a nice recapping activity. I've started to use Jamboard a lot. So Jamboard is a G Suite tool. So it's there and it's free and it's compatible with Google Classroom. It's really a kind of slideshow if you've not used it before or seen it before. Very, very simple to use. So in advance, all I had to do here was I wanted to recap students' understanding of how they work out what word class is what. So we'd already gone over some key questions we can ask ourselves to ask whether it's a verb or a noun or an adjective. And this is something that I wanted to recap, wanted them to retrieve. So in advance, all I had to do was on this Jamboard, put in verbs, nouns, adjectives, 1 on each slide. So that took me 5 minutes. Then I upload this file onto my Google Classroom page. While we're online, all the students get on it. I've clicked the button to make them editors so they can contribute to it. And here I ask them, how do we know if it's a verb or not? What can you do to check whether it's a verb? And it was quite nice actually, because they can move the post-it notes around the page. So for each contribution, so for example, you can see here, she runs, he laughs. We'd talked before about if it's a verb, if you can add that third person S to it. So we can put all those together and they can start grouping the post-its together. So additionally, anything where you want students to connect ideas, Jamboard could be really useful for that. All they do is simply, there's a facility on the left, post-it note, type what they want, it goes directly on there, and everyone can look at that at the same time in an online lesson. So yeah, I think that's really good for recapping. So the things that we have tend to use then, Google Chat, obviously, very, very simple, just like we're doing now. Again, it's a way to get every student to contribute within the first 5 minutes. Very simple, very quick. Google Forms for more kind of quizzes and answers that you want to set up. Takes a bit more preparation. I mean, the nice thing about Google Chat is it's preparation free. There's really nothing that you have to do in advance. The Google Classroom question that I mentioned at the beginning. Some of our colleagues use MindMap, which is like a online mind map facility. So they get students to make mind maps online. Again, I think that's part of G Suite, so it's very compatible with Google Classroom. Jamboard, and also the option of all editing a Google Doc together. So just as we were all on that Jamboard kind of contributing at the same time, or everybody using the same Google Doc, posing a question, answering it. We can all see what each other's doing. That's also a nice example of retrieval practice. So I don't know if anybody wants to ask any questions about any of that or make any comments before we move on to modelling and explicit instruction. Any comments?
It was just a few more, Jenny.
Yeah.
We had a few people enter their comments just after we began again, and a lot of people were talking about Kahoot and the use of that. That's quite useful, especially on the online sessions. It can still be used. It's quite engaging. We've also had Seneca, which is a revision tool for most key stages in A-level as well. And we've got BBC bite-size activities some people have used and incorporated them. And Google Doc was mentioned. So having a Google Doc, assigning it out to students and seeing what they're doing. Good thing about that is it can be live if done through Google Classroom. And we've had retrieval tasks that have been prepared and uploaded to Teams. And then finally, Quizlet as well was mentioned. So Quizlet's quite useful. We've used it before. And also we've had another one in about Mentimeter. That's one that's been suggested there, which I've never used that before, but I don't know if anybody else has. Have you heard of that, Jenny?
I've not heard it. I don't know if the person that uses it would like to use their mic and explain what it is, or use the Google chat to do that.
So we've only used it with staff across the trust at conferences and such like to gauge like collective response to things, but also to gauge the percentages of those responses to things. So it sorts things for you.
It lets you put like a little bit like the one you just shown about the post-it notes. It lets you throw post-it notes up, so you could ask a question and people can write text answers, and then it has the facility to sort them. Or a bit like Kahoot, you can choose the question, you can pre-type a questionnaire. It's quite useful, really. It's a bit like Panda in one way, but then it's more data analysis in another.
That sounds great. What was it called again?
Mentimeter.
Mentimeter. Okay.
You have to set yourself up with an account.
Right.
And I have to say, we haven't tried it with primary age children. We just tried it with all our staff several times. But, 15 schools being able to access it at the same time.
Yeah. And is it free?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. That sounds like a really nice one. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to explicit instruction with modelling. So certainly with the pre-recorded videos when we were using Loom, just really sort of paring down our lessons, and I suppose thinking about cognitive overload really, and just really concentrating on those couple of things that you really want them to understand, and being very, very precise with your instructions and what it is that you would like the students to do. And then modelling, which has become a very kind of useful activity, and again supported by the Education Endowment Foundation in terms of it having a real difference in students' learning and progress. So us modelling to students how we tackle the problems in our subject, the tasks in our subject. So using a visualizer is something that we do at our college. And just as a reminder, when you're doing these modelling tasks, the idea is that you're speaking in the first person and you're talking through exactly what you would do and how. So the picture on the screen is our head of teaching and learning. She did an insert where she had instructions for how to look after a guinea pig, and she modelled to us how she made sense of that text. So I suppose part of it is that kind of metacognition idea that we do all sorts of things because we're adults and we've been successful learners that we take for granted. And it's the same in your subject area, whether that's, science or English. It's modeling the step-by-step process that you go through when you tackle a task that you probably do without thinking because you're an adult and have been doing this for many years. So in English, that might be modelling, annotating a text, and we'd have the text there on the visualizer. We'd have our highlighter, we'd be highlighting, be saying things like, okay, well, I've just noticed that there are some really interesting verbs here. And I noticed that all these verbs kind of have connections to animalistic behavior. So I'm going to make a note of that in the margin because I think it relates to my question about how this character is presented. So you're speaking in the first person, you're saying, I'm noticing this, I'm going to do that now. This is what I'm thinking now. And the idea is that the students step into your shoes and see and understand and perceive what you're perceiving. And that's supposed to really help them with understanding your topic. And it's, just being really kind of aware of the tiny little things that you've taken for granted, like what does that word in the question mean? What is the first thing that you do when you sit down and you see that question and you've got the text in front of you? Do you highlight first? Do you plan first? What does planning mean? How do you plan? So you'd actually plan that in front of them. I'm going to do my plan by writing down 4 keywords, and each of those keywords links to a different topic in a different paragraph. And that's going to remind me that every paragraph is going to be about a different topic. And now I'm going to collect quotations to match each topic for each paragraph. And I'm going to select this quotation and this quotation. So talking through exactly what you do, how you do it in the first person, and using the visualizer to do that so they can see exactly what you're doing. They can see your pen, they can see your highlighting, they can see what you're writing down. Johnny, I think, is going to talk us through now the sort of practicalities of using the visualizer, because it's not quite as simple as just plugging it into your laptop when you're on Google Meet. And Johnny, is that all right if you talk a little bit about how you've used it in computer science?
Yeah, I mean, for recorded sessions, for Loom videos or things like that, dead simple to do. It's really effective, and I love modeling, and it's something we take for granted when we're teaching. It's really simple to model things. I've got whiteboards all over the place, and I'm constantly attached to a whiteboard pen. So I'm just writing things all the time and modeling practice. But when we moved to online sessions, I had to seriously think about how I can model student answers, questions, things like that. So I decided I would try and use a visualizer on my online sessions. So I'd have a mini whiteboard, and the visualizer would point at the mini whiteboard and I would write it. And the first time I did this, it took me about 15 to 20 minutes to actually work out what on earth was going on, because I plugged it in, I set up my online session, all the students, so 22 students came in, and I was looking at the screen. So like you can see me now, my webcam is viewing me. So what I needed to do is I needed to use my visualizer camera input. So I had to change over from my webcam to my visualizer. And if you could all just do me a favor in the chat, if you've got access to a visualizer, can you just put that in the chat? Just interested to know how many people actually have visualizers. At Oldham Sixth Form, each teacher has got one, or each classroom, should I say, has got a visualizer on their computer. But I had to change over to a visualizer, and then my whiteboard was being projected then to the students instead of me, which was great, because then I didn't have to, there was no pressure on to look good. So I had to just basically use my whiteboard. And when I started writing, everything was backwards, which was strange. I was like, it's mirrored. So I was looking at the screen, everything was back to front. And then I asked the students, can you see that? And then they said, okay, yeah, they can all see it. So when it actually goes across in Google, especially, I don't know about Teams and I don't know about Zoom, but it goes back across, it actually flips itself again. So the students can actually see it like you would see it. It's just strange how you view it. So all you have to do is switch over your camera that you're looking into over to your visualizer, plugs in on a USB, and you're good to go. So what I use it for is I use it for student questions or written questions that I'd model. I have a whiteboard, and sometimes even put a textbook there if I need to show someone a paragraph of a textbook, and it's good for showing them sort of things. So that's how I've used it anyway.
Brilliant, thank you, Johnny. Okay, so modelling on a Google Doc is also really handy. I mean, clearly you could do this in a face-to-face lesson, but thinking about the advantages of technology, just the fact that every student has got this screen right there in front of them closely, I think is handy. So here I was modelling a GCSE English response to paper 1, and reminding them how to start, reminding them of the structure of the paragraph. And I was typing it live in front of them and kind of modeling what was going through my mind in terms of what I was going to do next. And then afterwards, reminding them of the structure of that by using those highlighted colours. So clearly, you know, we could do that on a whiteboard in a lesson. I suppose it's just saying, don't forget that that is something that works really well online, because all the students have got that screen directly in front of them, and you can talk them through what you're doing and why. Moving on to ideas about metacognition. So kind of linking really to modelling. The reason we have to model so much, I suppose, is because we have become good at our subject over many, many years of practice. And there are all sorts of things that we do in our subject because we are adults, and because we've been doing our subject for many years, and because we were probably all fairly successful learners as young people too. So it's being aware of that, and it's being aware that the children, the pupils, the students that we teach are obviously at a completely different stage cognitively. Sometimes things don't make sense to them. Sometimes they don't understand why we're doing what we're doing. So it's being very aware of all those things and being very explicit about why we're doing what we're doing, and being aware of all those thinking about thinking activities that can really help with their understanding of our subjects. So at the beginning of an online lesson, we might be very aware of, you know, these things would take for granted. What do you need? How long should it take? What I'm doing? What am I going to do if I don't understand something? How does this actually link to what we've done already? Why is this important? So at the beginning of a lesson, sharing those things, and having a slide at the beginning can really help. And that's especially, I think, true with the pre-recorded lessons, if anybody's still doing that or will do that, because obviously you're not there then to assist them live. So that was certainly something that we realised was important when we were teaching in that way, reminding them of what they needed to have there in front of them, things that we might take for granted. End of the lesson, it's similar, so kind of making sense of what they've been doing and why. Again, that's something that we take for granted because it's our subject. For us, it's very clear about what we've been doing and what the aims were. Is it really clear for them? It can really help with their understanding of our subjects if they understand how everything fits together. So questions like, what's the most important thing that you've learned today? Why? What can you do now that you couldn't do before? So making them aware of their progress helps with metacognition. What has been the purpose of what we've been doing today? Can you tell me? And how are you going to use what you've learned today in the future? So that's something that I think we as adults get very good at. How am I going to apply this? And thinking about how I'm going to apply this is something that really only develops with age and experience. So getting them to think about those things. Moving on to peer-to-peer support. this was something that I felt in terms of my lessons over lockdown was probably the weakest component of everything that we did, and that needed addressing. It needed addressing because the Education Endowment Foundation, they do say that this does make a difference. So in their research, they have found that students working together and that kind of peer-to-peer support that brings does make a difference with students' development. One of the reasons they say that makes a difference is actually linked to modelling, because what the students are getting is a modelling of good practice to them, not from you, the teacher, but from their peers. So that can be anything. It can be how the other students went about doing what they did. That's really important, to see their peer and how their peer approaches a problem. That can really kind of light up a light bulb for them, and them understand, okay, that's how you approach it. I've been doing it this way. Also kind of good behavior that you want to promote, like just how much effort goes into doing well. I think that's something that a lot of students underestimate and fall into this trap of thinking, well, I'm just not good at this, and that's why I don't succeed. What peer-to-peer support offers, as in seeing how their peers do something and tackle something, it makes them realize, oh, actually, that person succeeded because they put a lot of effort in. And when that's modeled to them, that can make a difference. So really, I suppose it's any kind of group work, and group work is harder online. It's harder to facilitate, I think. It is one of our challenges. Group work as well, you know, it brings all the advantages of students seeing more examples, more variety, better responses sometimes than their own. So that idea of sort of elevation and kind of rising to the top. But it's also the behaviour of the other pupils and how they got where they got that's important in terms of having it modelled to them. So group work, collaboration, peer-to-peer support, how have you managed to do any of that online so far? Should we have a sharing of ideas again? I need to walk around my classroom to get the light to come on, so just excuse me a minute. There we go.
Okay, as people are typing, Jenny, from the visualizer stuff, most teachers tend to have visualizers as standard, really, which is quite good to see. Lots of people use them in different ways. It's good to know that Microsoft Teams also, you have to switch the camera to, so it's not just Google Meet that has these things. And no platform is specifically recommended. We all just adapt as and when, don't we? So yeah, everybody seems to have visualizers and varying use of them, which is quite interesting. Victoria's just said we haven't managed peer-to-peer support online. We use the PM MASH grouping facility to set TUDOS. So, I mean, I've not used Purple MASH before, but I've heard of the online platform that people use. It's got quite good integration. So we also have a blog that the children can contribute to, but no group work as it is in class at the moment. So it seems to be something that's stumping a lot of people, and we're still trying to work around.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I suppose it's not going to be the same. It's never going to be, well, as far as I can see, yeah, it's clearly not going to be the same as having students sitting in the classroom doing something together. But if we think about, well, what's important about peer-to-peer support, and it's that modelling of the behaviour that led to that good result, maybe if that's our focus, we can think about it in terms of how we're going to achieve that. So Google Chat, so having chat rooms can be something that promotes collaboration. So with my A-level students, I've set up chat rooms for each coursework text that students are doing. So having that informal space to chat online has been useful. So there on the left are all the different chat rooms, and I had to sort of start the discussion, but then the students since then have been asking each other questions and collaborating a little bit there. So that could be an option, the Google chat room or equivalents to that. Again, Jamboard used a bit differently here. So rather than used for retrieval practice, here used for a homework. So here the task was to describe a place that a student had been. And I suppose what you get with peer-to-peer support here is, so it's all the same document, so students can see each other's. And I think it's that idea of, well, look, this student has made a really good effort here. She's clearly made an effort with her language choices and the time that she's put into it. So it just that kind of elevation in terms of effort levels, time, promotion of what it is that you want the students to do. I think they're quite good actually at seeing what is a good response, a good effort, and realizing that if theirs falls short, then it does need a bit of improvement. So Jamboard used as homeworks there, and something collaborative. I mean, also, I suppose set as a homework, maybe this would work with younger children, perhaps getting them to produce a page together. Maybe that would be an option. Getting the students to collaborate on a Google Doc. Again, I think anything where they're seeing other students' responses, and especially live, it's just that ability to see what other people are immediately. So I've been doing this a lot. There's a creative task on my Lang Lit course, and we've all been having a go together at doing that creative writing. So again, you know, as they're typing, the students can see the other students' contributions. And I think that is having an effect. They are kind of looking at what each other are doing, and it is informing their writing. It is improving their writing because they're seeing how the other students are approaching it. And as I said, I think they're quite good at working out which the best ones are and trying to emulate some of those best features of it. So here, each colour represents a different student here. So it's just about kind of seeing the depth and the different ideas from each student immediately. I think that works well when we're all editing the same Google Doc. I did this today actually, so I had a go today at getting students to complete a table, and half my students did one character and the other half of the students did the other character. So while there wasn't any discussion amongst them while they were doing it, they could see what each other was doing. And I think that made a difference. And they were kind of collaborating in that they produced this, they didn't copy what each other were doing. They sort of thought, oh, right, well, that student's covered slang, I'm going to cover something else. And this is a longer doc, you can't see it all. So half the students did the character of Stanley in the streetcar named Desire, and the other half of the students did Blanche. So we did have that kind of culmination of ideas at the same time. I then talked through their responses, highlighting the best ones, also correcting any misunderstandings. And then the students copied what they thought were the 3 best ones for Stanley and the 3 best ones for Blanche into their booklet. So I think what you've got there is the students immediately being able to see what everyone else is doing, selecting the best ones, that kind of shared collaboration of doing it together, and that did work quite well. One thing that has occurred to me as well in terms of an advantage of all this, and a lot of these both retrieval practices and when we're all editing the same Google Doc, is kind of the anonymous nature of it. So on Jamboard, I can't always see very clearly who's writing what, and it's just that kind of low stakes aspect of it, I think really works well. So it makes me a lot more confident about correcting mistakes without offending anybody, because it's not always clear who's written what. And I think that can actually be a big advantage, because the students don't feel foolish or embarrassed about mistakes. Yeah, because of that anonymous nature of it, really. So when we've got this here, I can't necessarily know who did what. While they're typing, I can see their names. So I sometimes have a pretty good idea, but I actually always talk about it quite anonymously and just say, well, this is a really good point here. This needs a little bit of improvement just because of this. And I think that can work quite well online in a way that it's sometimes harder to do in the classroom. Any comments or suggestions further to that about peer-to-peer support? I mean, anything where they're making things together, whether that's making Google Slides, making a video, I mean, that's all collaborative, isn't it? Using Jamboard. Yeah, I don't know if anybody's got any further suggestions, comments or questions about those ideas.
We just had a message in before from Tracy, who said at the moment they're focusing on getting children used to the format of online learning. Obviously, that takes time to train people and get people set up on those sort of processes. So getting them ready on behaviours as they found that it was a social opportunity, but rather than a learning one. So they're spending time getting that down first. And Leanne's just put in there Padlet. We've used Padlet before. I don't know if you used it before, Jenny?
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? It's similar to Jamboard in a way, isn't it? A kind of ideas, yeah.
I mean, from my own personal experience using Jamboard, that requires a certain element of training with students, even A-level students. You would assume that they're mature. You would do, wouldn't you? A-level students, 100% they're not. Okay, they are just year 7s in an older body. That's all they are. And I put a Jamboard up and they went absolutely nuts. They were drawing all over the thing, throwing post-it notes everywhere and all that stuff. So I had to lock it out on them and then give them a little stern talking to, some expectations, and then we started the task again. So word of warning for you there.
Yeah, I did think about that in terms of behaviour, and I guess that's a whole different webinar probably, isn't it? Managing behaviour online. Okay, so final point I'd like to make then is quite a functional, practical one. In terms of the slides that you're producing and the videos that you're making, it's just a reminder really of the good practice there. So really main message, and one that I tried to practice what I preach when I made the slides for today's session. Really not much text on each slide at all. So really trying to move away from having lots of text on slides. And I suppose we all have had those experiences ourselves, haven't we? Kind of death by PowerPoint, where it's just reams and reams of text on a slide, and you lose the will to live. But also it has been proven that the information is a lot harder to digest when you've got really more than 1 or 2 words on a slide. So the idea is that it's image heavy, image and a word, a couple of words is supposed to work best. And it's your language that's important. So it's that mix of them seeing the image on the screen, and you describing and explaining to them, that's the best model. So in terms of our language, if it's a pre-recorded video, I think you especially have to think about this as well. It's supposed to be conversational and kind of friendly, rather than particularly stilted or scripted, which is not to say that you can't script it. And I know a lot of teachers over lockdown definitely found that handy to script their videos because they wanted to be very precise in their language. But the idea is that it's a kind of conversational mode, while using academic language if that's appropriate to your subject. Yeah, so avoiding cluttered slides, minimal text, putting the narration and the picture is best. Terms next to the picture, I think it's something called dual coding, where that kind of helps with memory. And just in terms of length as well, the shorter segments are best. I think sort of 20 minutes max, really, if it's a pre-recorded video that you're making. I think, yeah, anything longer than that, it gets a lot harder to digest. And I suppose when we're teaching live as well, making our explanations on the shorter side and obviously interspersing them with lots of interactive activities. And I suppose always following that model where possible of I do, we do, you do. So I show you, I model, I do it. If you can, a little bit of collaboration, but we've established that can be more tricky, a bit of the students having a go together, and then the students have a go, they do it. I suppose one big topic I haven't covered very much this afternoon is feedback, and that's clearly one of the most important things that we do as well. Again, I think online learning can lend itself to that. Feedback, always making sure feedback responds to how they've done in an assignment or an assessment. So things that we've done is making videos in response to their essays, in response to the misunderstandings that exist. So constantly making sure that feedback is in response to where your group of students actually are. And sometimes, rather than marking every piece of work in great detail, a more efficient, better use of our time, and what makes a bigger difference for the student is just to make a short video correcting their mistakes, going over their misunderstandings. So in terms of feedback, that's what I've found most useful too. Yeah, so that's kind of bringing us to the end of the session. Any final comments, questions? Before the next slide is information about the EdTech demonstrator program. So this is a free opportunity for you where you could sign up with either ourselves or a different school or college that are offering this, where you get some, your institution gets some one-to-one support from an EdTech demonstrator school, such as ourselves. So there's information there about that. And it's this email address. If you want to get in touch with us in particular, you can email there. And it's the website on the right, that EdTech demonstrator website, where you have to fill in what your requirements are. And I think there is the option of selecting a particular institution, but also you can just be assigned by the EdTech people. So that is an opportunity there for everybody, and it is free. Any final questions or comments?
Just Tracy said she found it hugely useful, great to share ideas. So yeah, and Rainhill High School, thank you, very informative. So you are too kind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. I'll stay on for a few minutes if anybody has any questions or anything they'd like to know more about.